Vic Williams with Reinforcement. Happy to be back. And today, oh my goodness, I hope my partner in crime of this show, I like to see this reading, Reinforcement with Vic Williams, and my good friend Maria Clara Harrington is here joining me today. And we're going to learn a little bit about trauma. You know, this is an expert that's worked in this field. We've worked together for years. We go way back. Just remember, should I tell the story or should you tell us the story when we first met? I'll start off and she could tell her part. But so my best friend was an FBI agent at the time, and he was throwing a surprise birthday party for me. And to get me there, he had misled me down some roads of some people we had been working with. And I get a call that a source was in trouble and he needed my help. And I was about to go out to the beach where I thought I was going to have my surprise birthday party. And he goes, I get this call like, no, we got to go and see this guy. So I go somewhere in Little Haiti and I see police tapes, like police marking tape all around this warehouse. And if you ever get a chance to meet my friend Tony, you'll know why I did this. Tony's like, I'm like, Tony, what's going on? What? He gets out of the car, he leaves it in the middle of the street and runs inside this warehouse. And I go, I can't let this guy go in by himself. So I run in after him. And back then we used to carry. So I go through this door and all of a sudden there's like 200 people there. Surprise! I was like, he got me. He got me.
It was a great, great party.
Yes. And one of the things that, he did, knowing that I think I had just started this human trafficking learning, and he had reached out. I don't even know how he found her, but he reached out because every time we had a party, we try to do something, give back to the community. So he called the human trafficking expert in to give a speech during the party.
Yeah, which was that was really funny. So first of all, Vic, I'm super excited to be here. Thank you so much for having me, and so happy that you're back in Miami. I know you were doing great stuff in Atlanta, but we certainly missed you all this year, so we're super excited to have you back. And yes, I'll never forget. So he called Christie House. This is when I was still working at Christie House many years ago. He called Christie House, and I got a message that, hey, the FBI wants a presentation they want a presentation. And so they gave me a date, which was a Saturday. And I'm thinking like, oh, okay, well, it's a Saturday. And then it says 7:30. And I'm like thinking 7:30 in the morning because I'm doing a presentation about human trafficking. That's all I knew.
Yeah.
And then she communicated with Tony, I think, a couple of times, and everything was confirmed. But this whole time I'm thinking I'm doing a presentation at 7:30 in the morning. And then finally I spoke to Tony, I think it was the day before. And he was like, yeah, no, so you'll be there at 7:30 p.m. And I was like, wait, 7:30 p.m.? I thought I was doing this in the morning. He's like, no, it's at 7:30 p.m. It's at an art gallery. It's a birthday party. And I'm like, a birthday party? I'm like, why'd you want me to speak about this and make everybody so sad during a wonderful occasion? He was like, no, you don't understand. My friend's been doing this work forever, and he's very passionate about this issue. Yeah. And so we want to bring awareness because this is what he loves. And I was like, okay, sure. And I showed up, and it was a huge, beautiful art gallery. And there must have been like 150 people or more there. The food, everything was set up so spectacular. But I remember like, why all the tape? And so they explained to me that they were setting it up as a crime scene, and there was a source that was going to be in trouble. And I'm like, okay, I'm not used to this,
right.
And so I walked into the gallery, and it's just tons of people, and they're like, oh, they're going to come through that door. And so everybody's like standing at the front, and I'm like thinking, I'm just going to go in the back just in case anything goes wrong. I'm just going to stand in the back, and that's it.
Right. It turned out to be a great event. And,
it was amazing.
And lo and behold, what happens after that? we started running into each other doing events. She was the first that started giving human trafficking 101 courses at Christie House, and a real big part of my growth in this space. But today, having you here, like I said, I hope, we can find time to do this a lot, because I think you bring a worth of knowledge, just your background in, human trafficking and trauma. And that's why I'm going to let you talk a little bit about, let's start at Christie House. Like, that's where we met. That's where you were doing your stuff. But if you want to go a little deeper past that and talk about what got you to Christie House, because I don't know if I know that story.
That's a great question. I honestly believe that everything was God's plan for my life. It's something, I feel like it was a calling and something that he put in my heart. I always knew that I wanted it to help other people. I was born and raised in Colombia and saw a lot of poverty and people not having enough resources. So I always knew that that was my calling, was to work and help other people that didn't have the resources to get the help that they needed. And so when I studied psychology, I studied at college in Colombia, and then I moved to Miami and transferred to FIU, which is where I finished my psychology degree. And I was working at a community mental health center for about 2 years, and I knew somebody at Christie House who was the financial director at the time, and they told me, hey, we have positions available. Why don't you apply? And I said, sure, I'll check it out. I always wanted to work with children. At the time, I was working with adults, and I really loved the job that I was doing. But my interest was specifically working with children. I wasn't sure in what capacity. So I went to Christie House, and I learned that they work with children who have experienced childhood sexual abuse. And I fell in love from the first time I went there. I fell in love with their mission. I fell in love with their organization and the great work that they were doing in the community. So I applied for the job, and I started as a case manager back in 2001. And so I had 18 and a half years there of a lot of growth professionally and personal growth, and learned so much about childhood sexual abuse. But then back in 2007, when Sandy Scalani came to Christie House, she founded Project Gold, which was the program specifically for children who have experienced sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. And so I became close friends with Sandy. I started volunteering within her program and helping out where I could. Still working, at that time I was working in the outreach and education department. And so I started learning more about trafficking through Sandy. Then Rachel Lloyd came and did all the trainings for us. And she was amazing. Both of them, I learned so much from both Sandy and Rachel. And so I started doing participating in the outreach that they were doing in the evening throughout the different tracks in Miami. We would go out from like 1 a.m. to 4 a.m, trying to reach out the youth that were out there on the streets and letting them know that there were services available to them. And that's how my journey started with sexual exploitation and sex trafficking. So I feel like it was God had prepared me. And I feel like even with, most people have experienced trauma in their lives. And I feel like even with looking back at my own childhood trauma, like I feel like everything was a preparation to what I was going to be doing and helping other children and helping other youth. And so I think it was no coincidence that I ended up just being fully invested in working with youth that were sexually exploited and trafficked. When Sandy went to another organization, Trudy Novicki, which was at the time the CEO of Christie House, asked me to step in and take over the program temporarily until, they were figuring out what to do next. And that turned into me becoming the director of the program and run the operations of the drop-in center for 5 years. And it was a really wonderful time. Being, it was, as you know, it's challenging. That's what we did a lot of our work together, some of the cases in the middle of the night and all of that stuff. And so it was definitely very challenging, but also very fulfilling and very rewarding. And it's giving me the experience to also be able to educate others and raise awareness and understand how to help serve them in a way that it's more positive, and in creating environments that are safe for survivors to come forward and access the services that they need.
Yeah.
And so now that I'm at Citrus for the past 3 years, which has been also a blessing to be able to join the Citrus Chance team and be able to work together with such an amazing team. And now more in a role of just specifically doing education and trainings in the community, and helping other organizations around the country develop a similar model, or actually develop our model, the Chance model, into their programs. So it's exciting to see and help support others in this journey as well.
Let's go back to the drop-in center, because I know we had crossed paths a couple times, and I remember coming there a couple times as an agent, talking to the girls, buying pizza, whatever, just trying to give them like a positive male role model perspective. And I learned so much. I remember we arranged a little boating. We had access to a boat, and I arranged for these girls to go out on a boat. And because I believe exposure is everything. And what a great day that was to take these girls out. They'd never been out on a yacht, and take them out and just ride around and just see Miami from a different perspective, from the water. And, that was an amazing day. You remember that day?
Absolutely. And I think, you did so much for us at the drop-in center, Vic. And I think people sometimes don't realize that it's not just about therapy, right? It's so much more. And so they need to be, they need to be able to have those opportunities to have those recreational activities that will enhance their self-esteem,
right,
will help develop social skills. This is so important for the psychosocial development.
Definitely.
And, these are youth that for the most part, they have experienced so much trauma, so they didn't have these opportunities. And so I think a big part of them being able to thrive again, it's also providing them with resources, providing them with education, providing them with tutoring, providing them with recreational activities that help them grow so much more as well.
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the things that is so important that people forget. It has to be holistic. It has
Yes.
to be comprehensive. It's not just about therapy and treatment. Of course, that's such an important part of it, but everything, it's an important part of that healing journey for the youth, and for even for adult survivors of human trafficking.
Yeah.
In essence, their childhood was taken away from them. So giving them that time where they have those moments, and being that day on that boat, and they had never done that,
Right.
and how amazing that was, and how happy they were.
Yeah.
And giving them those moments where they didn't think about anything else other than just having a good time,
Yeah.
eating great food, seeing Miami from a different perspective, right?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
so many of them had been abused in the streets of Miami, and now they get to see Miami in a different light as well. And so I think that was definitely so great.
Let me tell you how dedicated this woman is. And I don't know if you remember this. We were out, my best friend Tony and I were out having dinner with friends, and I get a call from the hotline that there was a girl who had Googled, how do I get away from a pimp online? And I get that call. The duty agent was in Weston, and we were having dinner like somewhere on Brickell. And she was in a hotel close to the airport, so we were really close. And I was like, I got to go, guys. Tony was like, well, I ain't going to let you go by yourself. We got in the car, we went to this hotel, and, skip all the stuff. We anyway getting this girl out, and she didn't have anywhere. We didn't have anywhere. I'm going to tell you, this is about services, and we've grown in Miami where we had lack of services. The drop-in center isn't a 24-hour thing. You work with these girls for a certain period of time, everybody goes home. I called her 12 o'clock, something like that, 1 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, listen, I got this young lady here and I don't know what to do. And we just need her somewhere for the night. And she goes, well, Victor, this is not 24 hours, but I'll meet you there. And you took care of that young lady that night. You stayed up. She slept on the couch or the back in the room. And then we got her up north. I forget the organization that was helping at that time, but we were able to get her the next day services that eventually got her back home. You remember that?
Yeah.
That was.
I remember. Well, there was more than, there was a few times. And I don't know if you remember that one time where we used to have a hotline. And you called the hotline, and it was like 2:30 in the morning. And what you didn't know was the hotline went straight into my personal cell phone,
Right.
Because that's all I had.
Right.
And it was like 2:30 in the morning, and I was in deep sleep, so I was like I didn't know I was answering the door, the phone, or what. So I was like, "Hello," and you're like, "Hello," and I'm like, "Yes," and you're like, "MC?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Yes," and he's like, "Oh, I was calling the hotline." I'm like, "Victor, I am the hotline."
Right. No, I mean, we've done a lot. I talked about recently the experience we had. Was it Nova University or what particular college? I think
It was Nova.
it was Nova.
It was, yeah.
Yeah, they were doing they wanted to do a PSA on human trafficking, and they invited us to do that. And we actually won like some type of film award for it. I mean, we didn't get any prizes, but just to know that our work and just the, it's all about awareness, and educating people. And I know this woman is very passionate about what she does, and this was before you had your family, so, but that was a great time that we did that, working on that PSA, and it went out. I wish I could find it now. I would post it because it was a lot of good stuff. But it's just to say how much you've been dedicated to this. I retired in 2018, left. You've been working at this forever. So,
well, you didn't really leave because you were doing also trafficking work in Atlanta. And I think it's always been such a big part of your heart. And even though you had, your years of doing very important work somewhere else, your eyes and heart were still also with trafficking.
Oh, yeah.
And I think, I think we don't do this work in isolation. I think, and I appreciate your compliments, but I think it's the teamwork. And one of the things that I think it's so unique that I love so much about our community is how we have been able to work so good together, law enforcement, with service providers, NGOs, and all the different organizations in the community coming together. Because very often people do their work in isolation, right? Here it's law enforcement, here are the service providers, but we've been really working with our task forces. We've really been working together, and I think raising awareness together, how beautiful is that, right? Like we're doing outreach together, law enforcement, service providers. I think that's beautiful because everyone is so invested in this issue, and that we understand, like you said, awareness is the key. If we don't, and sadly enough, we feel like we have come a long way, because when we first started, like you said, there wasn't a lot of services out there. There wasn't a lot of awareness. So we're talking so much more about it, but we still, like awareness wise, we still have a lot of work to do. And especially with the cultural thinking, right? How people view this issue. And so how do we break through those barriers, and how we talk about other issues that make communities so much more vulnerable and put communities at risk, right? So when we talk about human trafficking, we have to talk about everything else. We have to talk about discrimination and racism and oppression, and we have to talk about mental health, and we have to talk about trauma, and we have to talk about adverse childhood experiences, and the child welfare system and juvenile detention system, and all these systems as well. And so it's not something that happens in isolation. So there is so many things to address, and I love that you're doing this, and that you're still so committed to raising that awareness.
Does that mean you're going to join the team? All right, don't answer that yet. Because this is your first time. Like I said, we work together a lot, but this is the first time we're having this experience. And I always believe there's a purpose for everything. I'm thinking back times that, we not only been out there spreading awareness, you've actually saved lives. You've actually, when you were working at the drop-in center, those girls, like Maria Clara, I always struggle with that. And, so they were calling her MC. So I said, can I call you MC? Because it's so much easier, right? And I just remember how those girls looked at you. I mean, you saved them. I mean, you just gave them options. You know, you let them know that they were loved. And every time I went to that center, that's what I felt. When I walked in there, I was like, no matter what issues the girls were having or whatever, you resolved it with love. You didn't get mad. You know, they were doing whatever. And she's very calm. You know, she's always in a Zen mode. You're like, all right, girls, maybe this is a better way we can work this out. You know, I just remember so much love. And just staying in the drop-in center, how did you grow? How did you grow from that? Because I know going there, you're a different person. You came out a different person and more knowledgeable. What do you think you brought from that the most coming from the drop-in center?
I mean, I think, you know, when I went into this, I was thinking how I can help other people and how can I help impact people's life. And I didn't realize how much they were going to impact and change my life. And it's emotional because, I mean, the youth, they become like your own children, right?
Yeah.
And when you see people who have experienced so much pain and so much abuse and so much trauma, and people constantly keep giving up on them, like, oh, they keep giving up on them because of their traumatic responses, not understanding that, hey, that's a common behavior for somebody who's experienced that level of trauma. But they keep shutting the doors on them, like, I don't like their behavior, I don't like their attitude, I don't like this, I don't like that. And people constantly gave up on them, and not having that support system that says, hey, it's okay, we're here to help you, we're here to support you. And I think that was basically it. Something as simple as to just love on someone and give them support and cheer them on and be there in that journey when they make mistakes, when they're doing great, and just be in that journey. I think that's what everyone needs. That's what we all need as humans. We were built for connection. We were built to be in relationship with other people. And they said, you know, it takes for a person to really make it to have one person that at least supports them and believes in them. And the youth are amazing. They're the strongest people I know. They're really the strongest people, because behind all the terrible stories and the abuse and the trauma is the incredible stories of resiliency, of strength, of courage, of them fighting and surviving every single day after everything that they've been through against all odds. And so really all we did was just provide them a place where they felt safe, provide them a place with resources, with options, like you said, provide them a place that said, hey, you know, we're here to be, you know, to walk alongside you in this journey and to be there for you. But the truth and the matter is it all came from their own courage and their own resiliency and their own strength. And that's something that was the most inspiring thing for me to see and to watch.
Yeah.
Like, wow, this is amazing. I don't know that I could, you know, go through all of that and still be such a strong survivor like they are. And so I think for me that changed my life in so many ways, because I feel like sometimes we take things for granted and we realize like the blessings that we have around us and the importance of just helping each other and being there for one person, not realizing what's going on in someone's life, in someone's world. You know,
Right.
we see their behaviors, we see their attitudes, we see all of that, but we don't see the history behind it. And so people tend to judge that. And where is the compassion?
Yeah.
Where is the time where people stop to think like, I wonder, instead of thinking like, oh, I wonder what's wrong with this person, just thinking, I wonder what happened to them.
Hello.
Exactly.
Yes.
Right. And so, you know, with mental health, it's so hard, right? Because you don't see it. It's not there. If you see somebody in a wheelchair who can't stand up, who can't walk, you wouldn't ask them or expect them to walk.
Right.
But with mental health, with trauma, it's so much harder because you don't see it. It's not visible, right? You may see behaviors here and there, but people sometimes disregard those as like, oh, this person is just being difficult. This person doesn't want help. Not understanding that, you know, when you said this many times, those psychological chains are there, right?
Yeah.
And it makes it very hard for someone. It affects the way they think. It affects the way they feel. It affects the way they act. And us providing an environment where we don't judge someone based on that, and that we have the compassion to say, we're here with you, and we're going to walk alongside you and help you find the resources and keep cheering you on. And I think for me, that was very special. For me, that was a privilege.
Right.
It was an honor to be able to be there and be that person for them. And I still in touch with many of the young ladies. They call me, they, message me, and I love seeing what their lives look like today.
Right.
And, life is a journey, and you have your ups and downs. It doesn't mean that some of them may not have those downs.
Yeah. I think I got that from you. You said, what is it about people? It's the culture. It's how, we tend to we only know what we think we know. And if we're raised in a family that treat you a certain way, you normally raise your kids how you were raised. And we know families have generational trauma and pass until somebody recognize it and break it. But I think I got this from you. We would ask a kid that's been great, been doing well, and all of a sudden something goes wrong, and we go, what happened to you? Instead of asking, we'll say, what's wrong with you? Instead of asking, what happened? Because something happened. I don't think there are kids that are born bad. The moment we're born, we're being conditioned to whoever family we come into. And that's all we know. And as I went through my journey and continue to grow in this space, it was hard because, I joke a lot. There is a pre-human trafficking Vic and there's a post-human trafficking Vic. And that's been my life, I understand it, and it's been my journey. I was saying to my friends from Bauer Productions, studios, who's giving us this great facility, who's, providing this opportunity for us to share this information. I just was telling them earlier how right now I'm on a spiritual journey, right? And we need to focus more on ourselves. I want to live in a world where I'm operating from the inside out instead of letting the world dictate to me what I'm doing. And it's hard to break because it's been culture. We all want nice houses. We all want nice cars. But why do we want these things? Is it because other people have it, or is it because it's safety or whatever? At the end of the day, I say to people, most of us have inside of us what it takes to be happy, but we get caught up in all of the stuff around us, right? So that's why I want to talk about trauma. In this experience and growth that I'm on, and I look at you as the expert. When I talk to, about this program, and I'm all about culture. I see how the culture has shaped me. I see the effects it has on me, but there's more detail and more professional information about this. And that's why I love what you do. Can you talk about trauma? What is it? And what is it?
Yeah. And so, research has shown that over 70% of the adult U.S. population has experienced at least one traumatic event. And trauma can be an event or series of events that can range from a car accident, natural disaster, experiencing abuse, being a victim of assault, witnessing domestic violence. It can be anything, but it's an event or series of events that basically overwhelms that person's ability to cope. And we all respond differently to traumatic events. Like we could go through the same traumatic event right now, and we will have a different perception of the event.
Right.
And we would come out differently from that event, right? Have a different experience. I may be traumatized, you may not be traumatized, or we both may be traumatized but have different set of symptoms.
Right.
Because we're all very unique, and we all have very resiliency levels, different resiliency levels as well, right? And we have different support mechanisms, right? And those are things that come with like family, environment, friends, all of those support systems around you. And some people have them, some people don't. And so that also has an effect on the person, right? If you experience a traumatic event, what supportive systems did you have around you to be able to cope with that? And so that makes a big difference. when it comes to trauma and human trafficking, we know that most people with lived experiences of human trafficking are people who have experienced complex trauma, or what we know as polyvictimization, which is different types of trauma, different events, series of events of different types of trauma. And so very often, for example, people with lived experiences in sex trafficking, sexual exploitation, have experienced childhood sexual abuse, abandonment, neglect, domestic violence. And so it's different types of trauma. And so it's a much more complex issue. And I don't know if you're familiar with the ACE test, which is adverse childhood experiences. And so the ACE test was research done to really show the effects of trauma on your long-term health.
Right.
And we know there's a huge correlation between stress and trauma and your long-term health. And it's a 10 question questionnaire. Sorry for the redundance.
Yeah, it's all good.
And so it basically takes you through your childhood experiences. If you experience abuse, if there's a parental death or parental divorce or bullying or socioeconomic factors that also have an impact and stress on you as well, or parental incarceration, those types of things. So many different things, 10 questions. And the higher the score, the more likely you're going to have long-term health issues, right? Including early death.
Right.
What we've seen with the research and we've seen with human trafficking survivors is they tend to have the highest ACE scores than anybody else. And so we know that most survivors of human trafficking have experienced complex trauma. And that's not something that, it's something that has affected it's been a long-term effect throughout their lives. And so it's not something that it's easily, like sometimes people expect that someone goes to therapy and within a few weeks of therapy, they're going to be doing so well. No, it's a journey in treatment, right? And there are times where people go to therapy and they're, they don't need it anymore. They're doing really well. But later on, something happens that may trigger some of that past trauma and they may need to go to therapy again. And as I mentioned earlier, the research has shown that most people have experienced at least one traumatic event. And so we can assume that most adults walking around have trauma in their lives.
Right.
And so maybe when we look at things from that perspective, maybe we can respond a little differently when we're having these interactions with people who may be having traumatic responses. Research has also shown that your brain doesn't fully develop until about 24 to 27 years old. I always said, I wish somebody would have told me that when I was 21. That would have explained a lot.
Yes.
But
and I think that's longer for men. I think it's like 35 or 45 for us.
I always say, I think mine's still developing somehow.
Right.
But what happens when a child has experienced complex trauma is that it may alter the physical and chemical composition of the brain.
Yes.
And so an easy way to explain that is when you're going through a traumatic event, stress hormones go into your brain so that you can go into survival mode. Because right then, if there's trauma, there's stress, it's a biological response, you go into survival mode.
And what is that a flight? What is it?
That's a freeze, flight, or fight.
Yes.
And so some people freeze, they can't talk, they can't move, maybe they're trembling, they're really scared. Some people are ready to fight back, which we see that very often. And some people just take off. They're gone, which we see that. And it's known that people with lived experiences in human trafficking usually are in a constant state of fight or flight. So that's a common response.
Right.
And that's just for one traumatic event. If a child has continuously experienced traumatic event after traumatic event on a regular basis, that means that your brain is in a constant state of survival mode. And when your brain is in a constant state of survival mode, it's bypassing important functions of the brain like reasoning, functioning, judgment, impulse control,
coping
skills, right? So it's bypassing those functions. So the brain in a way it's not developing those important functions. And so the person remains in that constant survival mode, which is we commonly see that with survivors of human trafficking. So it's understanding that person may be hyper aroused, and they may be in, sometimes when you get upset, you say, oh, I went from 0 to 100 really fast. Well, maybe that person who's experienced so much trauma, they're already at a 20, they're operating in a 30 or 40 level on at any given day at any given time.
Right.
So something can trigger them quickly, and then you have a traumatic response, right? And so it's important for people to understand, because these, survivors of trauma, they're at school, right? They're attending school. They can be children in school. They can be in college. They can be adults working a job. And so understanding, I feel like we should talk about, how do we implement trauma-informed care in every aspect of our community, right? Within the school, so teachers understand that maybe somebody's being triggered. Maybe that child is just not acting out. Maybe it's a child who's having a traumatic response. And how can we respond in a way that instead of escalating that person into a crisis, that we de-escalate them and provide them support so they feel safe. And so I think in every aspect, right? In healthcare, law enforcement, the judicial system, social services, education in the community, education within the schools, I think it's so important, because most adults have experienced trauma. And I think how we respond to it makes a big difference between someone who can de-escalate, feel safe, access services, to someone who now is in crisis because we push them the other way.
You see why you need to be here? and that was my thought. You explain this stuff with people, the technical part of it. I could talk about, in a small sense, like I said in one of the shows that, if, like you can have two people that are, on a corner. One is there because they want to be, and one is there because they don't want to be. And we can't tell just by the physical appearance, but culture makes us look at them and judge them both on the same level. And I said, if I got your mind, I got your body. So if you've been experiencing these traumas, it leaves you open. It leaves you vulnerable to be exploited, to be standing there, not because you want to, because for whatever reason, this person is exploiting you. And culture is all about this judgment thing based on what we think we know. I always say that, what we think we know. Because if we really know all the stuff that you just said, maybe we start treating people a little kinder with a little bit of understanding, instead of going back to what's wrong with you, what happened? And it gives you that door to just explain why you're there, instead of like putting you on the defense, like, what happened to you? Or what's wrong with you? And got you on the defense. How much time we have? Because, I could talk to her forever, because this could be a 2-part thing. I don't know. Because this is where I love you here, because you get to explain that, where on the culture side, I could throw these experiences out that can say, we've all experienced this. Like the stuff you just said, no human being gets around this. Nobody. I don't care if you're the president of the United States or somebody that's in prison. Mostly the people that are in prison didn't address it at all. And I got this new thing, like where most of us are reacting instead of responding.
Yeah.
We live in a world of reacting, and it's because of these issues that we have and not trying to have the compassion or understanding. We're reacting instead of like, okay, let me think about this. Do I really need to address this? Or do I keep it moving? Does this person, really need my help? Or, I think the world needs to be in a response mode. And imagine what our world would be like if this lesson was part of our culture as we are raised. The world would be in such a better place. I know we're going to talk a lot about trauma. I want to talk about now, Chance. You left Christie House. And just a little bit on that. I don't know how much time we have, but I want you to be able to talk about what you're doing now. Because wherever you are, I like to be, because I know you're helping people and you're explaining these things, and people walk out feeling a little bit better, like understanding, So where are you with Chance now? How did that come about? Because I know we worked with those people before.
Yeah. So as you know, Dr. McGrath founded the Chance program at Citrus in 2013, and as a response to providing specialized therapeutic foster care for children with lived experiences in trafficking. And so I got to work alongside Dr. McGrath and Marta Torres, and they had such an amazing team of clinicians and really seeing how wonderful the program was operating. And as you know, I became a mom too.
Yes, yes.
And so I got to a point where I felt that because I was a new mom and I have a little one at home, I couldn't dedicate the same 50, 60-hour weeks that I was doing at the drop-in center and also dedicate time to my little one. And so it was a very difficult, emotional, conflictive decision because I didn't want to leave the girls and leave the program and leave the staff. But I also had a responsibility. And I also knew the effects of seeing the youth who didn't have those parental figures, who had experienced so much dysfunction within their home. I didn't want to, I felt more responsibility to even be a bit better parent for my own child as well. And so I made the very difficult decision that it was time to step away and didn't want to leave human trafficking. I wanted it to be within the field, but do something that will allow me to still be a mom for my son. And an opportunity came along with the Chance program at Citrus, and they asked me to be their outreach and training coordinator, which I have been doing trainings for a long time already at Project Gold. So it wasn't new to me. And so I was very excited to be able to join such a phenomenal program. It's doing great work in the community as well. And it was just such a blessing to have been all those years at Christie House and with Project Gold, and then now with the Chance program in a different perspective, in a different capacity. And so I've mostly been doing the trainings for professionals in the field, a lot of the new case managers, law enforcement trainings, been working closely with the state attorney's office and doing trainings for new investigators that are in their task force as well, prosecutors, also doing trainings for healthcare as well, hospitals, emergency room, and firefighters as well. And I've been working closely with the Hialeah Fire Department, which is a phenomenal fire department. It's been really great doing trainings with their teams, and they have great teams as well, and very dedicated people too. And because I do believe that first responders, they're in such a unique position, right? Most survivors of human trafficking will first come in contact with either a law enforcement officer, with a first responder, whether it's a firefighter or a paramedic, or in an emergency room type of setting. And so they're in such a unique position to be able to identify someone who could potentially be trafficked and they have not been able to come forward or access help or services. And so doing the trainings, how to identify them, how to respond, how to report it, which I think it's so important. And trainings in general in the community, doing a lot of work with the South Florida Human Trafficking Task Force, with the Services Committee and the Outreach Committee. We've been working together there and doing the outreach as well, which is something that I love because it gives us an opportunity to go into like vulnerable communities, right?
We just had an event a couple weeks ago. We were down south in Miami giving out, right before Thanksgiving, giving out stuff and to families, and which we had 100% participation. It was just that one family on the corner that
wasn't
I think
there.
they were, but we make sure they got, you know. I know we got to wrap this up. I can talk to you forever. And I do, even if whatever you decide, I think I want to bring you back to finish up some stuff because there's still some more stuff that I want to tap into, especially when it comes to educating, like you said, the first responders who themselves have a lot of trauma, a lot of issues. And if you can get them to understand it within themselves, I think we'll have a better community, like police community relationship. You know what I mean? So I want to bring you back, and anything you want to leave the community with, wrapping this up, you know.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me, Vic. It's always a pleasure to work with you. I do think that we all as individuals have a responsibility. You said something that it's so true, right? We need to unpack our own trauma, right? And understand where I'm coming from, what's inside of me, what are the things that I still need to work, because sometimes we feel like it's in the past, but it's still affecting us as adults, relationships, our job, our functioning. And especially for those who are working as in the field of serving and taking care of other people, it's even more critical that we're addressing our own trauma so that we can be healthy enough to be able to continue to provide care for other people. And it applies for everything as we become parents. My trauma is going to affect how I parent my child.
Right.
And so we all have that responsibility with ourselves. You said it earlier, we spend so much money on material things, right? The car we drive, the clothes we wear, the makeup we put on, or the gym we go to, and all these things.
Yeah.
But we don't put enough money in working in going to therapy, in addressing, doing spiritual healing, doing all that stuff that we need to address our own trauma. And most of us have that trauma. And so I think it's important that we individually address that so that we as a community can also address that and better our communities and create families and communities that are so much more resilient to human trafficking.
Well, thank you for coming. I want to thank Bert and Alexa for setting up this amazing studio for us. It's nice, right?
Amazing.
And they got the new facility up in Hollandale that I can't wait to go up and experience it. You guys are the best. Thank you for having us and creating this opportunity for us to educate our communities.
Thank you.
This is Vic Williams with Reinforcement with Vic Williams, and I hope Maria Clara Harrington. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.